everyone, today we are taking a look at the Goggles X from WalkSnail. The official name is WalkSnail Avatar HD Goggles X, but I think Goggles X works good enough for us, from here on out. And the things that stand out about this that make this different from what we've seen in other goggles is really two things. They've got somewhat of a modular design for future upgradability, because the one thing that Caddx has talked about is they are working on a new VRX that would give you greater range. There may be other features they're working on as well. And this, as you can probably tell here, this top cover, we could pull that off. There are two screws back here, and then we pop the top cover off, and the VRX sits right underneath that, and that's why we have heat dissipation or airflow right in there. So that's a good thing, and kind of gives you the road path forward with these goggles. And the other thing is having HDMI in and out right there on the side. That is mini HDMI versus the previous goggles that I think were made by Fat Shark. These might be too, I don't really know. Used USB-C display out, which a little bit non-standard. And another thing is the price point. When I heard they were making new goggles, I wasn't certain about the price point, and I was hoping, along with everybody else, lower is better. They should be launching at $4.99 or right around, and that is with antennas as well. They will not be including a battery pack. They kind of kicked that idea around a little bit, and it does also come with a battery strap and a cleaning cloth. You also get a case that they fit in with the antennas, so you have a carrying case that you'll be able to use if you use stock antennas or the non-stock antennas that are very similar in shape and size. Otherwise, we'll have to see what comes about of that. They do include a cable, of course, to plug it in. And speaking of that, there are a few features that I'll put up on screen that they did provide, and it does truly, and I asked them to double check them, it does truly support 6S. As it is on the sheet, it supports 7 to 26 volts. A couple other things just to call out. You don't have to read it if you don't want to, but pause if you'd like to read each and everything. The HDMI does not support 1080p 100 fps, so you have to drop down to 60 SPF, and that is the lower frame rate within the goggles. It doesn't actually say 100 FPS and 60 FPS. It says high frame rate and standard. So you want to switch down to standard to get your HDMI out working. The IPD adjustment has increased from 54 up to 74 millimeters. And as you see there, if you go down to near the bottom, the front cover, DIY as they put it there, where those LED panels are in the front, you can replace those and you can use patch panels in there. I presume they're working on something. I have not seen anything, but we'll also have, depending upon the popularity of the goggles, we'll see other manufacturers jump into making antennas, as we've seen in other goggles as well. You can use diopters, or you can get replacement focal adjustments to put over the top if you have special corrective vision that you need to account for as well. Another thing is the infrared sensor, which is kind of a proximity sensor as it is in the menu. And I found with that, in order to get that to be reliable, I had to press the goggles into my face. So I think that needs some adjustment. And that might be because I do experience with the single foam that they have included. They'll have an optional foam that you can purchase after the fact. And of course, again, if it's popular, other companies will make foam for these. But for my face, I get quite a bit of light leak around the outer edge, kind of back here, as well as in between the foam and the goggles itself, so I get a little bit down here. Now, when I'm flying, as in the case of any goggles and any light leak, I don't notice it. But it does seem to impact the proximity sensor. I might be off on that. It could be actually trying to locate our skin and how far away we are, but in order to get that to where it would activate, so I turned mine off because it was not working well for me, I had to really press the goggles into my face. And while we're talking about fitment, something else is I get it to ride on my nose, or I don't get it. It rides naturally on my nose. Let me put them on. So this is how they kind of sit on my face. And as I said previously, I get light leak in here. I can actually see in the kind of the reflection of the lenses. I can see the movement on both sides at the same time, as well as just a tiny bit up here. I can see my fingers moving along and blocking some of the light. This isn't necessarily a super bright studio. I could see this outside as well. The goggles have just turned on. You should see the LEDs up front. And yes, you can select different colors. Red, green, and blue, and off are the ones that I remember, but I will show you the menuing system here in just a moment, because you know, blue is best. So also, I wanted to give you an opportunity to hear the goggles. The fan does make a fair bit of noise. If you can't hear that, it is something that, as I sit here in a relatively quiet space, I can hear the fan creating its air movement outside amongst the sometimes cicadas this time of year, sometimes the birds are mowing. I don't notice it, but sometimes in my videos you can actually hear the HD0 goggle fans really whirring about, especially on the inside flight videos. So fan noise, it seems to be, it's kind of just coming to standard, but there is no controls in the menuing system for the fan. And I've kept the goggles on here for a little bit because hopefully I'm still looking towards the camera, is I just wanted to take them off to see what sort of imprint. You know, you can see where my nose is right here. It doesn't feel hard or sharp. I still know that I have foam between me and the housing of the goggles, but it's pressing kind of down in that area. Now, I don't feel like I can't breathe. I've felt that before with goggles. I can still breathe through my mouth, or through my nose, excuse me. I can close my mouth and I can breathe just fine. So it's not pinching my nostrils shut. I can just feel it there. And I'm just going to take them off now, and we can take a look at my face to see where it possibly imprints. I know it's not a full flight time of wearing the goggles, but I actually haven't done this myself. I haven't looked at my face after having the goggles on for a little bit. So let's do the big face reveal. Yeah, I can see some lines underneath my eyes a little bit. They're pressing up against there. Now, I do have a giant head. Let me put my glasses back on. My strap here, I'm going to need a strap that's a little bit looser, I think, for my giant head. To give you some idea, for a fitted baseball cap, I wear a 7 5/8. Sometimes, depending upon the brand, a little bit bigger. I know it's a big head. I played ball all the way through college, and I had one of the biggest heads on every team I played on. And now, that doesn't mean more brains, but it does mean a larger skull. But you know, you can see here, I've barely got any Velcro left here on the strap. This strap goes all the way back here, and this strap is kind of a pleather or not leather, so I don't have much more adjustment I can make. And the strap isn't very flexible, especially if you compare it to something like this aftermarket Pyro Drone strap that I've got on the original goggles. This is much more stretchy. So for me, I would probably get another one of these straps, or you can get a strap from your favorite vendor if you find that this stock one does not suit you. Inside the goggles, right there in the center, we have our, let me square that up, we have our proximity sensor. I have, of course, turned that off because of the troubles I had in the past. But let's dive into the hardware and get a closer look at all those things. So before we dive into the individual details, I wanted to give you a side-by-side from the old goggles here. You can see the difference in the structure and how they're kind of designed. Of course, the look and feel are different. We've got different antenna layouts, and then we can look at the side here. And then we can look at the other side as well. Your joystick location on the side versus the two buttons up top. They've kind of lined everything up there. And then we get a little bit of a look here. Inside the goggles, the housing, the shape where your face goes. And I gotta say, I do prefer the foam on the left, or the original goggles. I think it's a little bit more comfortable than this design here. And you can also see that we've got these lens covers on here. Well, I can't seem to get them off. I believe those are lens covers, because that's just like the images they have for what you can insert over the top for corrective eye needs. But I did feel like the old goggles, my eyelashes touched them all the time, and I don't feel like the new goggles do. My eyelashes do flash, or touch, excuse me. You could probably see on these goggles a little bit of those marks that my eyelashes would make on the lenses, because they do sit so close to my face. So the structure design is a little bit different. Of course, our faces are all different, so whether they work for you or not, It's kinda to be determined. Okay, so we have our IPD adjustments. These move in and out just as I showed you on the spec sheet. You can see we've got a little bit of room here where the nose piece isn't completely down. But also for your visual adjustment, you can turn these dials to adjust in and out. And they have, when you first turn them on, instructions on how to do that. You can go back to the instructions through the menuing system too. But they have text on the display so that you want to just turn these to where the text is as crisp outer edges as you can get them, and that's probably the picture that you're looking for. Also the aforementioned HDMI out and HDMI in. We have our SD card, and then we have your audio video in and out. We have some more ventilation over here. We, of course, on this side, this is not a power button. This is just to indicate where you plug power in. We've got our barrel connector that comes with this. Across the top, we've got our, this is our record button here, and then our back button here, and then our joystick to drive the menu. Of course, you click the joystick to bring the menu up, and then you can use that to drive, and then when you want to go back, you just touch that button, and then if you want to record, you touch that, and inside that hole, that is your binding button. So a paper clip, a shaved down chopstick, whatever you find goes in that hole, and you do flash these and upgrade these just like you would any other VRX or goggles. You insert the image file on the SD card that you download from the Caddx website. You power on the goggles, you wait for them to fully power up, and then you press and hold that down for at least a count of 8. The goggles will start to beep. They'll beep and beep and beep continually by a same kind of rhythmic pattern for about 8 to 10 minutes. And then the last series before it reboots, the pattern of the beeps or the rhythm of the beats will change a little bit, and then it'll stop beeping, and then it should come back to where you see the display with the text on the screen indicating that your upgrade is complete. The last side is this over here. Nothing to see. Let's take a look at the straps so you can get a look at that. So all you strap designers, this just fits through there, just like I had it, hopefully, and the last little bit for my ginormous noggin. And then we have these front patch panels. I call them patch panels because I suspect most people would put patch panels. Now, there's no connector on the inside. You do just like with other goggles where you would unscrew your lower antennas and insert your patch panels, and they would have a little wire that would come out, and you'd screw those down for those SMA connectors. Speaking of the connectors, to give you a little look here, we've got the pin in the connector versus no pin in the antenna itself. These don't lock into place, so there is potential that if you take them in and out of various carrying cases or you set them down, that they could move a little bit, so you might have to readjust them. They don't feel sloppy. They don't feel like they would move very easy. I think, if anything, it feels like there's a little bit of wiggle before it actually starts to move as far as your visual adjustment. This feels fairly solid. It's going to take a little bit of force in order to move these back and forth in order to get the IPD adjustment out of whack there. I am glad that they included a multi-color panel, but there's a lot of other options, whether you're into it or not, that I suspect we would see from these panels. Things that might display your pilot name or googly eyes, or, you know, the sky's the limit with what you can do with LEDs. So there's potential future fun that, if you're interested, you could have by taking these panels out and inserting some aftermarket ones. Again, depending upon how popular the goggles are and if manufacturers want to take that design and manufacturing process and bring it to market. This is a look at the menuing, and as you can see, the menuing really hasn't changed as far as the layout or the design. Again, to get HDMI, you have to go in, you have to have a camera connected to them in order to change the setting. You want to go from the high frame rate to standard, which brings you down to 60 FPS in order to get HDMI out so that you can share it with somebody else that's presumably standing close to you. I guess you could do some sort of wireless HDMI display hanging off your goggles. That's more weight off your nose, but there's all sorts of potential when it comes to HDMI, and as I said earlier, that is micro HDMI. They have mentioned also that they're developing an app for later use. That app we could see all sorts of features from that app, but the one that they had kind of named was being able to update the firmware from your phone or from the app on the phone, and that would connect over Bluetooth. But I did not see where this was broadcasting itself. when I looked at my cell phone to try to find any sort of Bluetooth that I didn't recognize, or might say something like avatar Bluetooth or something like that, I didn't see that that was displayed. So I suspect we're looking at a future firmware that would have that feature enabled to where you could pick up the Bluetooth for the app, or we're looking at maybe a menuing change within the firmware to where you enable and disable Bluetooth on this. I can't say at this point because it's not something that is active currently, or at least not in my set. It's not active because I didn't pick it up. And as some of you may know that you come to the channel, I've worked in technology for 30 years. Finding a Bluetooth network is not foreign to me by any stretch. Now it comes down to the visual experience. And what I did was I bound up two quads, same camera, same VTX to each set of goggles. And I wanted to do it that way just for my own purposes of testing. For one, you know, we could do the HDMI to a laptop and play a movie or something like that. But I really felt like getting in the camera, so to speak, was the best way to compare them. So I could set them up side by side. And so that's what I did. I took them outside, and I had the quads pointed in the same general direction, and I just kind of would look into the goggles on one side, and then I'd switch over and look into the goggles on the other side, and kind of back and forth I would go. Now, the field of view has changed. It's increased up to 50 degrees field of view. I did not notice a change there. Also, I couldn't notice a difference in the colorization, which we can change in the goggles, or the clarity. I just didn't necessarily percept that difference for me. Something that I did notice, though, was that on the original goggles, I really couldn't see all four corners of the screen, even as close as my face was to the lens. Remember, I talked about my eyelashes touching the lens, whereas my eyelashes don't touch the lens on this side, but yet I could see clearly all four corners without cutting them off. I could see the points of the displays in the Goggles X. So that's one thing for the visual clarity, but it's really hard for me to be able to discern any other difference. And then it comes down to, you know, is this going to be worth upgrading to this from? It have to be some other feature, whether it's a compelling feature in that future VRX, which I would hope when it's released these then come with, but we don't know that for a fact yet, or some other feature that you would really be compelled and you would part ways with your money in order to get from this to this. And as I was recording, I have found out the price has actually decreased to $459. I don't know how compelling that is for many of you, because it's still a lot of money, but I do appreciate a few things that they took part of, and I kind of started the video with it, is the modularity that you could change the VRX when that does come out. It could be 2 months from now. It could be a year from now. Who knows how long and where they're at in their stages of development for that. There are some customization options with these front panels where you could include patch panels that would fit neatly inside the box still, or some other sort of fun stuff that we talked about. All sorts of possibilities. And the eventual supposed possibility of being able to use an app on your mobile phone in order to flash firmware onto the goggles, maybe even your VTX. I doubt that, just unless a new VTX comes out that's got Bluetooth built into it as well, maybe. But once you establish that Bluetooth connectivity with a phone app, it really comes down to what feature sets they want to push and their own creativity as to what it might bring to add value or enhance the use of the goggles. I do think with that new price point that just came out while I was recording this at $459, that does make it more compelling if you're looking to get into the WalkSnail ecosystem, or if you have a VRX that you're using on another set of goggles and that just didn't suit you. Maybe it was weighing down too much on the front of your nose, and now with it just being modular, possible upgrade, and this new form factor suiting you, that might make it worth it to jump from a VRX to this goggle if you're already into the WalkSnail video system. So for me, a few things I would like to see changed right off the bat, which I'll probably do on my own, as we oftentimes do. We customize these things. So I need a new head strap for my ginormous head so it doesn't press so hard into my face when I'm wearing them at this extended length. And I'd like to try out some different foam. Those two things are going to be pretty inexpensive for the most part, usually less than $10 each, but or around $10 each maybe. And we've seen foam from various companies come out for our own comfort and face shapes that could come in very, very handy if you suffer from light leak that does bother you when you're flying, or it just doesn't fit your face very well. I kind of feel like I have to adjust these a little bit more. I will say I don't have to adjust these as much as I do the DJI goggles 2, and I did put replacement foam on those goggles. I actually bought 3 different kinds, and then I found one that kind of worked for my face, and then I kind of carved out the nose. So they fit a lot better than they did, but these still fit about as well as those DJI goggles too, with the aftermarket foam and the modification that I made to that foam. Just kind of full disclosure on how I look at the goggles, how I kind of evaluate what I'm going to do going forward for the goggles. Yes, these were sent by WalkSnail / Caddx for review. I did not pay for them, but they don't get to see the video any sooner than anyone else, and they don't have any input other than just me asking questions. One of the questions I did ask them was about the HDMI out, that the 100 frames per second out does not work. You have to change it in the goggles in order to make HDMI out work. You have to get it down to that lower frame rate, because the HDMI module just doesn't support the higher frame rate, which for sharing might not be quite as useful, but I fly alone, so that really depends on your use cases and how you see that. If you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I'm very interested to know what you think of how they built these goggles, the look of the goggles, what you think of the goggles overall, what you were wanting to see, what they didn't bring, like the power button. No power button on this. Down in the comments section below, please. I really want to know. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.